Recording in progress.
Welcome everyone to tonight's Spiritist study group. In this study group, we explore the teachings of Spiritism and we delve into the first book by Joanna de Angelis in her psychological series entitled The Currentness of Jesus. My name is Fabrício Assunção. I'm the coordinator of the Spiritist Society of Bournemouth and the Joanna de Angelis International Study Groups. A big thank you to each of our speakers for being with us tonight. They are Anaí Fonseca, Humberto Schubter, and Silvia Gibbons. Dr. Anaí Fonseca is a psychiatrist and Jung analyst who, for some 30 years, has been working in psychotherapy, diagnosis, and research on the relationship between spirituality and mental health. She is a member of the Medical Spiritist Association of Brazil, where she teaches Spiritist Psychology by Joanna de Angelis. Dr. Humberto Schubter is a member of the Brazilian Academy of Philosophy. He is a professor, researcher, and an author. Sylvia Gibbons is from the Chico Xavier Spiritist Society in the UK. She is a humanistic counselor, bioenergetic, psychodrama, and deep memory process therapist, interpreter, and translator. As we join together to discuss and reflect on Joanna de Angelis' teaching, I invite everyone to share your thoughts, insights, and questions. Our goal is to create a supportive and thought provoking environment where we can deepen our understanding of Spiritism and its principle. Our study group is a space for reflection, discussion, and spiritual growth. In this session, we will delve into the fourth chapter of the book, The Current of Jesus, which is called Jesus and Love. To start our discussion, I invite Anaí to open the debate. Over to you, Anaí.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here among friends and everybody else that are joining us together to study and reflect upon this beautiful book by Joanna de Angelis. Was her first in the psychological series, that is The Currentness of Jesus. So today we are discussing about in chapter 4, beautiful chapter about Jesus and love, right? I just wanted to remind you that in the first chapter that you have already reflected upon and discussed, she ends the chapter that it's Jesus and challenges. She ends the chapter with this sentence: those who fear darkness get lost in the night. Be someone who lights up a candle to chase away the darkness. Challenged, Jesus prevailed. Follow him and never hold back before the tests meant for you, for your, spiritual growth. So I think she's giving us the path, the way to understand the currentness of Jesus, because we are called upon all the time to the darkness that we say in psychological terms, that it's the shadow of the collective unconscious. Okay, we know these days. People are still talking about wars and different conflicts around the world. So, why Joanna is showing this path that we should reflect upon the currentness of Jesus? Of course, each chapter has its own message, and she is leading us like by the hand, to understand and to reflect upon again Jesus' teachings and example of life. But today, in this fourth chapter, if we think about being someone who lights up a candle to chase away the darkness, and don't we need that? Chase away all the darkness that is still very apparent and each time more in our collective unconsciousness, right? This shadow, this darkness. So let's see what Joanna says about, and many of you have already read the chapter. So I just point out some very important sentence that I think and that I have reflect upon, so we can discuss with Humberto, Fabrício, and Silva, and everybody else that it's here this night. So when she talks about Jesus and love, one of her sentences, and I quoting. Jesus' entire life unfolded along the lines of profound oneness with the divine consciousness, while maintaining his individuality in perfect psychophysical balance. So, why a spiritual teacher, a light teacher as Joanna, is calling our attention to this example that Jesus' entire life unfolding along the lines of profound oneness with the divine consciousness. Okay, and why is she talking about maintaining at the same time maintaining his individuality in perfect psychophysical balance, right? So I think Joanna here is showing, and we are going to discuss more. And please tell us our ideas. As Fabricio said, that's the main objective of these meetings. But I think here she is telling us how to be in this material world, right? With a psyche, our soul here, the spirit here incarnated in a soul, in a psyche, and a body also, the material part, because she says psychophysical balance, that Jesus was giving us this example. And at the same time, to be connected, then this is a duality, our psyche and our body, right? Matter and spirit, for instance, and at the same time to be connected in a profound oneness with the divine consciousness. That's a non-dual perspective. Well, like Jesus says, the Father and I are one. Then that's the Christ consciousness, right? So see how the light teachers asks us to expand our, not only our consciousness, of course, but our vision, our understanding of ourselves, and of course giving our highest model, that it's Jesus the Christ, right? And then she goes on some other topics that I point out for our discussion, and let's see what the other friends here have themselves, their reflections. That but Joanna goes on saying that he inspired confidence because of course the example that he was giving daily life, in the daily life, not only what he said, of course that was so important, because but also because he gave example of what he was saying. Okay, and of course, she's saying, and she has pointed out some what she was saying about moral corruption here, how to face moral corruption, prejudicial laws, excessive preoccupation with appearances, things like that, that are still, in psychological terms, evidence of our shadows aspects of the collective and individually. So yeah, we could say that how to face the shadow that Jesus was giving in the example in his life, and with his example, how to face the shadow in the collective without submitting oneself to it, how to face all the threats and all the fears that the collective, and the wars and corruption, moral corruption, all of that, without submitting to it, right? So she also goes on saying that Jesus' life was an example of how to be patient and peaceable, serene in adverse circumstances. Of course, she was talking of having no fear, having a profound and extended and better vision of our true reality, the reality of our souls, of what we are doing here. Jesus said, I'm the way, right, to Christ consciousness. And also that Jesus was showing us how to be cheerful in emotionally charged moments, right? So again, in Joanna's words, she says now, and quote, in a violent, perverse society, he chose love as the solution to all matters, solution to all matters at hand, and unrestricted forgiveness as the effective therapy for all infirmities. So each word that a light teacher says is not by chance, people, because there is a meaning that unfolds to our own psyche if we open up our minds and hearts to the teachings that a light teacher as Joanna is calling us, to pay attention. So she's saying that he showed these principles, right? Forgiveness and love, uh, and we could say the workings of love in the psyche. I'm looking at from a psychological point of view, and how it heals the soul, and the soul's wounds, and elevates our spiritual consciousness. That's all that, and basically, the path that Jesus was teaching us. So he showed us these principles of love and forgiveness by, and we quote Joanna here, clear and honest attitudes, especially towards the unfortunate, the unclean, the outcast, and the needy, she says in this chapter. But why? Why, I would like to hear you all, why Jesus chose, right? The unfortunate, the outcast, and the needy. And we are going to think about that together. But then she goes on, love was always on his agenda, illuminating lives and assisting the needy in body, mind, and soul. He showed mercy toward all. Nevertheless, hold on to the energy that educates, uplifts, disciplines, and saves. Love guided his steps, words, and thoughts. He became and still is, says Joanna, the symbol of complete love for humankind, to which he promised a profound and liberated humanist. So here I bring to your attention, and I'm finishing here so we can all talk together. I just point out some of her words. Going back to the beginning, I would like you to hear you also about this oneness with the divine consciousness that she says in the beginning of the chapter. So probably I connected, let's see what your opinion, this oneness with the divine consciousness, with what she says that love guided his steps, words, and thoughts. Because if you are one with the creation, right, then you are going to manifest love in all of your life, in all the expressions of life, in our different relationships. So I think here we have enough material, and I would love to hear you guys.
Infinite. So, um, I was when I was reading the chapter, one thing that caught my attention was she started to say Jesus as a human and an example of perfection and completeness. And then for me, I was say, oh, okay, so the idea of Jesus being God and why she's bringing the idea of Jesus as a human within the chapter of Jesus and love. And then I was like, well, is it that and this understanding could be that Jesus is the God of love because it's the fullest expression of love in this planet. And that's what I was like, okay, maybe it's not the idea of God in a religion context, but maybe in the meaning of love in terms of the fullest expression of love. So on that aspect, I would like to hear maybe Umberto and then going to Sylvia.
Well, I especially liked the uh, harmonization or the integralist approach that Anahi just presented, because the book strikes me particularly for the Platonic or the Neoplatonic approach assumed by Joanna de Angelis, uh, who is clearly a Platonic philosopher or a Neoplatonic philosopher. That's something that we can spot also in other books by Joanna de Angelis, and interestingly, something that we can spot in Juana de la Cruz, the greatest Mexican poet, intellectual, scientist, a philosopher, a theologian of the 17th century in Mexico, and who is claimed to be a previous life of Joanna de Angelis. So I like this connection because it shows me that this person, this spirit, this consciousness is attached or is linked very heavily, very deeply to this new Platonic way of being and philosophy and lifestyle. And what is the essence of Neoplatonic philosophy? It is basically the reconciliation and the harmony between opposites and extremes. It is a balanced, integrative, serene, and very, very rational way of dealing with the contrasts of life, light and shadow, feminine and masculine, positive and negative, and so on. And they not only envision nature itself as the balance between the opposites and the contradiction, but they also see human life, morality, and uh, the intellectual aspect of the world in the same fashion. And regretfully, I was not in the previous discussion about humanity because I so much enjoyed and loved this chapter about humanity. And I think it is heavily linked with the current chapter on love because humanity and love are in not only in harmony, they are also in a consequential, in a causal relation in this book, in the currentness of Jesus. So humanity is, we could say, the perspective, the way of seeing and receiving everyone as a child of God, deserving of respect, justice, and love. Uh, when Jesus gave his central commandment, loving God and our neighbor, he was not talking about a sentiment or an emotion that occurs to us, like something that happens to us psychologically only. He was talking about an attitude that we could impose. That's why he gave us this order, this command, the imperative to love. You cannot command, you cannot give an imperative of an emotion. You can only give an imperative or a command regarding an action. And that shows us that Jesus considered love a sort of philosophical interpretation of the word, a sort of worldview, and also a sort of action, an attitude, something that you have to choose and to make efforts um, to promote. I think this is extremely beautiful because in between these contrasts between light and shadow, good and evil, primitivism, primitivism is a word that she especially likes. It is interesting how uh, unjudgmental she is, but she assumes that some things um, uh, are too primitive, or they correspond to very, very basic states of mind and mentality. And Jesus' attitudes, they are enlightened, and they enlighten us because they assume the complexity and embrace the complexity and react to the complexity in a serene and mature way, conciliating and harmonizing these these challenges, these contrasts, and these opposites. Then, of course, humanity and love are not in contradiction. They are nothing something that we should harmonize with a lot of effort, but they represent the sort of capacity to promote balance between the contrasts and the troubles of life, I think.
Thank you, Umberto. Sylvia, I'm coming to you for your contribution, please.
May I skip my part for the moment? May I?
Okay, so another interesting point that I was reading in the book, and maybe we can discuss that. She starts saying Jesus' transparency, like diamond, like basically being the integral being. So that means no shadow, a being completely full of light. And then when I was reading this, I was like, I was being awakened to the importance of us to work our shadows, because that's the way we will then move into this journey that Jesus came to show us, that he was a full being of light. So Anna or Umberto, Silvia, um, could we elaborate a little more and discuss about this, like Jesus being a a transparency like diamond like, which means no shadow.
Okay, so I think this is very interesting because, of course, as Humberto is talking about from the point of view of philosophy and a brother, right, Humberto, each one of us are, getting in contact with the text of Joanna de Angelis' messages through our own personal experiences. So mine is from the depth psychology. So for people that are not very aware of depth psychology or analytical psychology, as Jung created, let's say, all these principles, his development in psychology, we use Jesus, the Christ, right? Or Jung talks about that as an archetype of the self, capital S, which means our higher consciousness. And we could say the divine within us, right? So I think when Joanna is talking about this diamond, as you said, aspect, this all this light, right? That Jesus brought to us, and that helps us actually to integrate what is still shadow on us, because if He's the path to this higher love, higher source of power, in a sense of creation. And Jesus says, everything that I do, you can do, and even more, right? So, which means that he was showing us the path to this diamond, let's say, probably we could think of as a representation, a symbol of the self, right? This preciousness that we all have inside of us. And in psychological terms, as like Christ is as the archetype, okay, it serves as a blueprint, as a model for us to achieve the individuation and reach our higher self, right? For the ego to talk better in this life, ego, the center of consciousness here for the psyche, but to understand that it is a higher consciousness within ourselves so that we can do, as Humberto was saying, this path towards a wholeness, to be and to express the unique and very original in individual, let's say, that we are here, but as part at the same time, as part of a wholeness, the oneness that Joanna says with the divine consciousness. We are part of this divine consciousness. We have this diamond, this light within us. Let your light shine, right? That is in Lucas, the apostle. So, and just to remind people that individuation is a lifelong process of integrating these opposites that Umberto was talking about, this light and shadow, this positive and negative, this masculine and feminine forces of the spirit, right? Consciousness and unconscious aspects of the psyche, so that we can express this wholeness and this unique individual that each one of us are, but at the same part having this connection, as Jesus expressed, this connection with the source, with the divine consciousness. And I was just remembering, we study a lot in psychiatry and psychology, for instance, the near-death experiences. And if you pay attention of the people that are testifying and are talking about their near-death experience, one of the things that it is described in psychiatry research that when one of the people, the most near-death experiencers, they say that they experience is a sense of love and connection that they can't even describe because it's nothing compared with the sense of love they experience in this life. And some of them even say, well, I don't even think anymore of anyone that is, in my previous life and this and that. And they go through a stage where they are asked if they want to return or not, and they have some doubts, some of them, because especially this sense, this fulfillment, this sense of love. And so I think Jesus was telling us that we don't have to wait to die, or of course, and to go back to the source. We can and we should express and live this love here in this life. Then it's another way of being in life, that it's all the example of Jesus' life. So I think this diamond, Fabrizio, for me, it is a representation of this divine, and that Joanna was calling our attention to this representation of the divine within us, that it's part of our individuation process in this life. I don't know what, Umberto, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also why enlightenment demands a lot of courage, because if we are not mature enough, if we are not conscious enough, we may drift or escape from reality, incapable of dealing with it. So this harmony, this balance, and this peace and love that Jesus transmits demands a lot of personal growth, consciousness, and also courage. I like this passage. Also, not only what Fabrizio read, uh, she says, and she was also, that's very, very important to remember, for many lives, she was a martyr, a person, a woman of extreme courage capable of giving her life to the cause. And she says, he never yielded to the prevailing impositions and never backed down, even when the general consensus granted legality to the crime. And he remained serene in the most adverse circumstances. That is the evidence that this personality is used, is experienced and used to trouble, to difficulty.
Thank you, Parker. Sylvia, would you like to contribute something, or shall I move on to the next?
No, just a very quick point, really, in relation to this, when she says he had diamond-like transparency. Um, I agree with everything that was said, but I also see this in a more kind of life reality, because she says his character possessed diamond-like transparency, which never yielded to the prevailing positions, characteristic of a primitive culture, where there's a predominance of misleading conscience, hypocritical conservatism, and so on and so forth. I think one of the things that Jesus was, what she's saying, he was so transparent. He would never yield to anything that was imposed, the hypocrisy, or like he used to challenge all the time, the law was made for man, but the man was not made for the law. That kind of thing that in times people they feel very righteous because they follow certain rules and regulations. And Jesus, he never allowed himself to follow this. He always he stood on his own, excuse me, on his own um, truth in a way. I mean, I don't really like this expression very much. It has become very diluted, because I think it goes to what she says. He was an integration of divine consciousness. I think he was, to me, what she means that he had the divine. He was a divine in incorporated, embodied in a human being, and he could be trusted because I see it. You trusted Jesus because what he said, what he was, he was. Nothing would change his mind, or he would see certain advantages. And I think that's one of the things. And I'm thinking about the question in the Spirit's book, when Kardec asked the Spirit, what's the model for humanity? And the spirits gave one answer: Jesus, because he never he said, if something he saw something that was wrong, it was wrong. If it was something that was right, it was right. You could trust him. I think in a way, you could trust him because he would not be swayed by different opinion, or because someone was clever than that, or they knew the law better than that, or anything. And I think one of the things that always comes to me whenever I'm reading things like that is that even though he was persecuted, they were trying to bring him down all the time and kill him and whatever, but they would always call him Master. Whenever they came to him, they would say Master, even in that they knew that he was right. They knew who he was really, but to follow him would let go of their power, what they thought they had, that was importance. But they recognized that he was a master. They would always call him rabbi and things. And I feel this like a model for us. How many times we think that something is not quite right, but we keep quiet because we don't want to offend, or because what would people think if I'll be the only voice against because everybody agrees. And I feel that in a day-to-day life, and I think that's for me anyway. This book is Joanna wants to bring Jesus back to where he belongs, to us, to our daily life, so we can check ourselves every day what we're doing with ourselves, with our lives, and with the knowledge that we are getting from this. How many times, we're very hypocritical, even though we know it, because by now we already know quite a few things. And I think this brings to us, what am I doing? Am I being true to myself, to what I've learned, to how I can change? Um, because she says also in the next paragraph, demonstrating true courage, he stood up against injustice, wherever and against whomever it occurred. So he was never afraid of saying what was right. And sort of reminds very much his conversation with Pontius Pilate, when they are talking together. And he was patient and peaceful. And I think for me, it brings, am I integrating this in myself? I think Humbert said something about, the process of individuation, like the gospel say as well, to do something good, to do good, you need to think about it and you need to want to do it. It's more than just I'm going to no, you really think, no, I am going to do good. I am going to be this person, better person than I was. It requires some courage. It requires commitment, and it requires that we make an effort. And I think that's the most beautiful thing here, because it reflects how much of this as someone who says I follow the teachings of Jesus, how much am I being true to what I've learned? I bring it to my day-to-day life and question myself, really.
Thank you, Sylvia. So Bob would like to contribute?
Yes, reference has been made to the bright light of the diamond, but I think also the diamond is very sharp and very strong. And one comment in what Joanna has written is that we should avoid sentimentality. And our speakers tonight have talked in terms of challenge and toughness. And I think love in the context of Jesus isn't sentimental, isn't soft, isn't an easy ride. It brings you with challenges. I'm always reminded of that beautiful set of verses in Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, love doesn't keep scores. It's always a challenge to myself. Can I put the word Bob in there? Bob is patient. Bob is kind. Bob isn't quick to anger. Well, I know the last one I certainly fail in. Love in the way that Jesus practiced it, and it wasn't just speaking it, it was practicing it and showing and demonstrating it, is tough. And I think one of the loveliest sentences in the reading tonight is about the great power of forgiveness, showing forgiveness. It is not only showing love towards someone else, it's actually showing love to yourself. And we are meant to love others as we love ourselves. So it's a commandment to love ourselves. If you forgive people, you're showing love towards yourself as well. And that can be tough. Don't keep score with someone who's insulted you. Forgive them. Help yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So, moving on to the next, just linking with what just Bob said about challenge, is interesting because Joanna started the book with Jesus and challenge. So she was already preparing us to face the challenge. And then on this chapter 4, she say Jesus being patient, peaceful, serene, jovial, in highly emotive situation and adverse circumstances. When I read that, I said, wow, that is challenging and that is difficult because we seem to succumb the most when the hardship knocking our door, right? And then for me was how much we practice or try or make an effort, to be patient, to be peaceful, to be serene throughout our hardship. Does anyone want to comment on that?
Humberto, you want to go ahead first?
No, you may start.
Okay. So it is something very important, and Humberto and Bob talked about, and also Silvia, about courage and the courage to be true to oneself, right? And but I think it's something important here that forgiveness, for instance, is important to others, to forgive others, but as Bob said, we have to forgive ourselves, right? And it just came to my mind, but I want to hear that Thelma has raised her hand. It just came to my mind a sentence by Joanna that I think it's important in what you said, Fabrizio, that just to contribute to this reflection, she says, not here in this chapter, but in Love, Unbeatable Love, one of her books, all about love, the book, of course. And she says that love is innate in human beings because it comes from the supreme love. Okay, I'm not going to say anything else in this moment because we want to hear Thelma and have time for and Umberto and somebody else. But I just wanted to bring this so we can reflect upon what Fabrizio has just asked or point out.
Thank you, Anna. Over to you, Thelma. Oh, we cannot hear you.
Not now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So what you said, it reported me to the second paragraph where she says that all his life he had this profound integration with the divine consciousness, while at the same time preserved his individuality, and he was in perfect equilibrium, psychophysical equilibrium. And this reminded me of something we read yesterday on the book of Eckhart. Which is something I find it very hard to do. And according to Joanna, Jesus did it with perfection. When we are doing meditation or when we are in deep prayer, we have this peace inside. We have this harmony inside. It's like if everything falls into peace. And then we are connected to the divine consciousness. And how do we carry that to our everyday life, to our everyday tasks, to especially what you said, to when challenges arrive, when things that involve emotions, how do we stay connected to the divine conscious in the face of these challenges? I find this one of the most difficult things to do in our everyday. Usually for me is like I'm either connected or I'm in my everyday life. But to be on both, as Joanna says there, it's a real challenge for me. And I think that when we reach that point, when we learn to do that, then we might be on the right path.
Thank you, Thelma.
May I
Speakers?
jump in? Well,
Just one thing, sorry, just
absolutely.
very briefly, to Thelma. I'm sorry, but you're not alone in that. We all have problems to having the two together, and I think it comes to what Anahi was saying. The process of the individuation is when we have both. We can, we are come all the roads coming to one, and we are one with ourself and with our divine um, consciousness, our divine source. And I think it's challenging and it's hard, but we're going to achieve it. I'm sure of it.
Thank you,
I
Umberto.
totally agree with Sylvia. And in Hindu tradition, it is said, and it's a basic principle that you cannot make spiritual progress without a guru. The guru is the efficient teacher and leader that guides you and mentors you towards perfection. And you should never be arrogant enough to believe that you can make the journey alone or without an enlightened master. And well, that may be exaggerated. That's a very typical feature of Hindu culture, but I think there is a profound truth in this principle, and we should all try to find masters in life. And Joanna de Angelis is obviously a moral and a spiritual master. She would never strike so persuasively in spiritual teaching if she was not uh, uh, she hasn't the authority of someone who did really made all the steps towards excellence and serenity and peace and love. And she's still humble and points towards Jesus as the only efficient model of human perfection. But obviously, we have many masters around us, people that we know that will help us uh, to even to guide or to make some of these steps towards evolution and spiritual progress. I would not have ventured much in life without my own masters and mentors. And I think we should never lose perspective of how massive and vast the journey actually is, and that we are all um, like tasting and experiencing the first steps in this path of spiritual enlightening. So I sympathize with your feeling. I also struggle with my moral condition, with my lack of consciousness and conscience, moral conscience also. And when I feel alone or in despair due to the 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 size of my necessities and the size and intensity of the challenges, I think prayer is the first way to connect with masters you don't even know and see. And the second way is to really look around and find people that care about you and love you and can help you with experience and sympathy and empathy.
Can I add something to Umberto's talk? It's just that since I provoked to you with the sentence by Joanna, love is innate in human beings because it comes from the supreme love. I would add, and I think it's wonderful that you remember, Umberto, about the prayer, right? Because it's a connection. It's our mind and our hearts searching this connection with the higher dimensions, higher beings, and also with our inner diamond, to use the image of what Joanna was saying. So I just wanted to tell you guys that in the end of one of the chapters that Love Unbeatable Love, her book, she says love is permanent light in the brain and continuous peace in the heart. So light and peace that are two very important dimensions, or let's say expressions of this love, as not sentimental love, emotion, as you guys have already said, but love as a power of creation that is within us. So when I totally agree. I also struggle with that. I think we all struggle with that, and it's great that Fabrizio brought the subject. How do we face the challenges? And especially when you are an extroverted as I am, so my attention is always coming or being challenged to the outside world, and we know that we need to pay attention to the our inner world, that it's also when the real psychological and spiritual growth is happening. But just wanted to remind you guys that one of the things that I've heard in some podcasts, a lot of people are awakening to this need of meditation and prayers. And one of the therapeutics of Joanna is visualization. I got mixed up, right? Therapeutic visualization to because imagination is creation. So to just relax and also to imagine in our psyche ways of that or images that bring peace to us, inner peace, and connection to higher sources. She is one of the her therapeutics that she proposes. So if we can put our hands in our hearts, for instance, while we are meditating, one of the hands as you feel, and we can remember this sentence by Joanna that love is permanent light in the brain. So our brain's full of light and continuous peace in the heart, and our hearts full of peace. I think it can help us when we are meditating and even when we are praying, just to have in the back of the mind this kind of image to light up our brain with the teachings of the Christ, and also to connect with the archetype of the Christ within us, with this diamond, and with the peace in the heart. Even if the outside world and our challenges, the ego challenges, the challenges that the ego has to face, make sometimes hard. I think it's a connection that we can make to our inner world and our higher self. That's that's it.
think it's interesting that when it comes to challenge, we're all on the same boat. And that's why Johnny started the book talking about the challenge. And just to add one more thing that is it actually said in this book, which is for me also came across as a challenge. She said, Jesus showed love not only through words, but also frank attitudes to the unfortunate, to the detested, to the marginalized, and to the need. I think that also it adds another level of challenge that is for us to learn to love those, the unfortunate, the need, the detested, the marginalized, because love these, the ones that is easy to love, then no challenge, but love the ones that is the detested, the unfortunate, and that is another level of calling us to learn how to love, right? Umberto?
Yeah, the discussion reminds us other things to say. And I just remind that art has a very, very powerful way to express this need of courage in personal transformation, spiritual growth, and uh, individualization, so to say. When in the hero's journey, we can see many faces of people who overcome challenge and deal with their challenges successfully by being courageous, being faithful, and being honest to their own uh, truth, or their own perception of the truth. And we can mention, for example, heroes in the classical sense, like the epic heroes, or Luke Skywalker or Harry Potter, classical movie heroes, or heroes in the unorthodox sense, such as, for example, Jane Austen characters. They are female protagonists that are literally looking for a husband, which means a change in their lives, in the situation of their lives, a promise of happiness, and mostly at the time, financial security and the overcoming of great pain and insecurity and suffering due to the lack of financial support. And Jane Austen herself was very unhappy in her life, and especially in the romantic life, in her romantic life. And she intentionally wanted her characters to be happy, to have what she couldn't have in life. I think that's very, very beautiful that even a person enduring great suffering and almost only loss in life wanted to give an optimistic and a positive view of life, even if we may call it romanticism or an idealized romantic view of life. I think she intentionally wanted to transmit this sense of victory in life, and victory and triumph in the face of adversity, which is the essence of a hero's journey.
Thank you. So we are coming up to the end of our study group. So I will call out the speakers if they want to do any closing remarks before you close the study group. Sylvia?
Just very, very quickly, because we didn't actually talk much about this, the part when the things I think how Jesus really show his love, and how when you talk about he having a diamantine heart and everything. And she gave us some of the examples, like the prodigal son, that when he helped, about the widow's mite, and also the mother, Nain's, the mother, the widow of Nain's, that he actually resuscitated her son so she wouldn't be left alone. About the Syrophoenician woman who had a daughter who was possessed. Then there was the other woman as well, who had that disease with the blood. Um, and of course, one of the most important passages in the gospel about the Samaritan, how, two people who were absolutely a priest and a Levite, they just left someone on the road to die and crossed the road, and someone who was detested, because I think nowadays we don't have the awareness of what it meant to be a Samaritan in those days, or a tax collector. They were absolutely despised in every single sense of the word. And he was the one who crossed the road to help someone, and really took care of him completely. And I think when we go into something that Bob said about forgiveness and one thing and another, I think this is a little paths that we can take. How many people around us are not so happy, maybe not in the same situation. We could give them a phone call and say, hello, how are you doing today? And sometimes we get so busy that we think about it. Oh, I'm going to invite that person for a cup of coffee, go have a little chat with her. And then, we don't, because we get busy. And I think this is one of the ways here, I think, because I Joanna, she's always so objective. She's so objective. Every single point, it's important. And she puts this point here that Jesus helped some people, and we can help people too, in different ways. A needle, like you send your pictures from Stonehenge, you went to see the solstice. And I thought, oh, I'm going to say how wonderful it was. And then the day passed and the other day passed and I didn't. Things like that, that makes people happy, bring peace to people. And I think that's how we achieve our process of individuation, our coming together. Because when we help someone, it grows something in us, is awakened and makes us feel better with ourselves and with others. And I think this whole point here that Joanna said about all the people that Jesus helped shows us which way we can contribute towards our own enlightenment. That's all.
Thank you, Sylvia. So I would like then to say thank you to Anaí and Humberto and everyone who is taking part with our study group. I will end the recording. Our next meeting is the 9th of July, and we're going to the chapter 5, Jesus and Tolerance. I hope to see you next month. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye bye.